Hey everybody, this week's episode of the Rahdo Q&A is brought to you by Elf Creek Games. And hello everybody, we are back for the second episode of my new weekly Q&A show, which, in case you missed the first episode, is actually going to be a series of excerpts taken from my normal monthly Rahdo Talks Through podcast. Now, you can still listen to the entire podcast for the month of June right now. It was 4 hours long, just shy of 4 hours long. It's all available, at podcast.rahdo.com, on a smartphone, however you listen to podcasts normally. But if you want to watch, well, I'm taking all that super epic episode and cutting them up into weekly bite-sized chunks. And folks, if anything I talk about today piques your curiosity or sparks a question, by all means, send your questions to questions@rahdo.com, because that's how I make the podcast go, and that's how I make this Q&A show go. I need more questions. Send them in to questions@rahdo.com, whether it's about games or the channel or about personal stuff or just about anything we're more than happy to talk about. And today I'm going to be answering a bunch of unique game-related questions. And here's the deal, folks. If I'm talking about a particular topic and you don't care about it, there's a link down in the show notes that will let you jump directly to any of the questions you want. So, if things get a little dull, just skip ahead to the next section. And I think that's everything you need to know. So without further ado, let's get to those cues so I can AM. All right, from Brett. Besides Gamerglass, do Jen and I like to pimp out our games, for lack of a better term? Are there any third-party inserts, game pieces, sleeves, or the like? Any Etsy purchases for our games or accessories that make gameplay better? Oh yeah, of course, there's millions of them. But are there any for us? No, not really. Obviously, my wife makes really wonderful gaming accessories. We use her gamer. I've got some of them just right off screen, right over there, that I sometimes have to use in prototypes that I'm filming, because sometimes prototypes don't come with all the pieces in them or whatnot. And we always love using her player pawns instead of just standard meeples in games and whatnot. So, that's nice for us, but that's because they only cost of goods and my wife's labor to make. And we've got lots of them. Lots of them. And they're great. Beyond that, no, I don't think so. I would say, actually, I'm pretty sure Ruel and I did a top 10 board games accessories. Didn't we? Top 10 accessories Rahdo. I am looking for that. I'm doing a Google search for that. Yes, it was the R&R show number 19 where Ruel and I did our top board game accessories. And so you can go check that out, Brett. I think that'll give you a pretty good idea, because there are some things, but they aren't the kind of things that people would normally consider pimping out a game. They're more for usability. Like clear plastic discs are probably one of the greatest inventions for enhancing board game play that Jen and I have ever seen. And we use them all the time. Why? Why am I mentioning this? Go check out Rahdo's top 10 board game accessories and you'll see. But in terms of fancification type stuff, yeah, I'd love to have every miniature in every game I own that has a miniature. I'd love them to be painted, because I hate lumps of gray, or at the very least getting that sun drop peel, or at the very least getting a wash. That's nice, because the higher quality a component is, the more I'm going to enjoy the game, because games are tactile. We want to touch them, we want to feel them, we want to see them. It is nicer to look at pretty things instead of ugly things, or plain things. And so, yeah, anytime you can do that. Probably the one I can think of off the top of my head that is the most impactful, both in terms of quality of aesthetic, but also usability, because just aesthetics is not enough for me, except for where it comes to Gamerglass. But I really want something that enhances usability too. So I'm thinking of the gamer bits, the game bits that Board Game Geek produces en masse for all kinds of different games. These are basically things that take the art of the cardboard shit you're used to playing in games and basically turns them into little acrylic things that just feel nice, but that also will not be suffer from wear and tear and start getting nips and chips and whatnot on them. I think those are amazing. I do have a few of them for a few games, most notably Orleans. Orleans is a bag builder where you are handling pieces in that game much more so than most. And just, the normal oils on our hands is going to break those down over time. So I think those are great. And of course, I think my wife's stuff is great. But if you want to know what else I think is great, go check out that top 10 board games accessories. It was the R&R show number 19. But just do a search for Rahdo board game accessories. You'll find it. Okay. Camilla says, here is some backstory. Questions in bold to make my life easier. Thank you, Camilla. All right, my name is Camilla, longtime listener of the podcast. I was really into board gaming for a few years, 2012 to 2017. I was really meaning I would go to Gen Con every year, listen to multiple podcasts, follow many channels on YouTube, and be on top of all the shiny new board games coming out. But then, in 2017, I moved from the US to Switzerland for work and had to sell many of my board games. I'm sure you can relate. Moving heavy cardboard boxes across the Atlantic is not cheap. Yes, I can relate, Camilla. And the saddest part of all is I didn't have my gaming group anymore. That's why you gotta marry a board gaming group. Having your board game group living with you day in and day out. I highly recommend it if you can pull it off. But anyway, with the folks on the new job, not speaking the language in a new country, not having found a good gaming group, I mostly fell out of the hobby. First, I stopped buying new games, then following board game media, and soon I only casually played a few games a year where friends were visiting. Yeah, I can totally see that. I'm sure you are not alone. Sob story aside, recently, due to a long-distance friend that visits frequently, I got really into board gaming herself, I found myself getting back into it, and I love it! Camilla! Okay, what a roller coaster you're taking us on. It shows me I never stopped enjoying board games in the board game community. Life just got too busy and the barrier continued too high. So long story short, having taken a 5-year hiatus and now trying to dive deep into the pool again, what did I, Camilla, miss? Of course, I don't expect you to list every single game that came out in the last 5 years, but in broad strokes, what has changed in the hobby since 2017? From your videos podcast, I know that we have similar tastes in games. Which 2 or 3 games do you think I should not miss out on? I feel somehow I have to make up for my lost time, and I feel some FOMO and a bit overwhelmed with how fast things have evolved in the last few years. That's a really interesting question. I think, for me, the best way to answer this question would be to go back to top.rahdo.com, which anybody can go to on your browser. Camilla, you can check this out as well. I'll bring it up on screen because this is a list of my collection of games broken down by how I personally rank them, broken down by 8. What were your dates? It was 2017 to now. Let's go back to 2017. Let's go way back when. Although, wait, to set the stage, I guess I have to look at 2016, where you still were. My number 1 game of the year, Manhattan Project, Energy Empire, Project Elite. And of course, that's the original one with the melted ice cream miniatures. I mean, which leads to the probably the number one thing you're going to see games have gotten better and better and better and better at is not design, is not mechanisms, it's production value. I talked about this in last month's podcast. Games look and feel prettier than they ever have. They've just gotten better and better and better because of fundamental breakthroughs in board game manufacturing technology. So don't be intimidated by that. But let's see, the networks, Aeon's End, Role Player. Okay, so that's where we were in 2016. So if we go to 2017. Boom, my number 1 game of the year in 2017 was Gloomhaven, and that has certainly been a big, significant sea change in the overall, in the perceived state of the industry. Because it's very easy to fall into the trap of, oh my gosh, the industry is nothing but big, giant behemoth boxes full of at least 250 hours of gameplay content that you must consume. And then, for only an extra $100, you can get an additional 500 hours worth of gameplay, blah, blah, blah. Because that's what grabs the headlines. That's where the excitement and enthusiasm is, because it's just exciting. It's fun. It's really kind of mind-blowing to think of a 500 hours of totally unique, non-repeated content. 500 hours is probably a bit much, but you know what I mean. So, and those generally cost quite a bit because the production on them is longer and harder. There's more you have to spend for people proofreading all that content and stuff like that. And so you might look around today and think, oh my gosh, that's all the game industry is now. But that's not the case. That still represents a super duper tiny percentage of the board games that come out every single year. I play very few of these, and I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything, quite frankly. I'd really like to try Oathsworn. I'm really kind of bummed I missed that one, but otherwise, most of them, they come and go, and I don't really care. So I'm just saying, the trend that Gloomhaven kicked off, do not be tricked by that. It's not really a trend. It's like this, a few years prior, Pandemic Legacy Season 1 came out, and everybody gloom and doomed, oh my gosh, from now on, everything's going to be a legacy game cash grab. And hey, guess what? That has not come to pass. At this point, there's like maybe a couple of dozen over the last half decade legacy games that have come out. It's really not that big a deal. A lot of people were glooming and dooming, oh my God, digital app integration into board games is going to completely ruin the hobby. It hasn't. There's like a fraction of a percent of games every year come out that have digital app integration. It was never going to be a threat. Digital app integration is way too costly to be able to be affordable on the incredibly narrow, thin margins that board game publishers work under. Anyway, though, but let's actually jump up a little bit more. Let's go to 2019. Let's see what 2019 looks like. Maracaibo, Black Angel. Okay, I look at those first two, and those are both, even though they're not gigantic boxes, they are still ambitious games with lots of gameplay. They're rich, meaty, crunchy Euros that are full of thematic flourishes and wonderful production, high-quality components, and they might look intimidating. But and tapestry as well. But then what was my number 4? Tiny Towns. Tiny Towns could have easily come out, in 2005. It doesn't push the envelope in terms of, design innovations or art or anything. It's just an awesome little game. Honestly, I would say the same thing for Wingspan. Probably the single biggest hit of the last decade. Wingspan has sold, more than 10 million copies now? 20 million copies? I forget. It's such a behemoth monster of a game. And yes, it has cool little eggs and a nice little die rolling tower built in, and it comes with whatever it is, 180, unique pictures of birds and all that. But the game itself is very approachable. I mean, it bends over backwards to be approachable. Miyabi, Isle of Cats, Walking in Provence, Mandala. Half of my best stuff from 2019 are nice, approachable games that are pretty much the same type of games you were playing back in the day. This is why I don't think, in terms of where it matters, where the rubber hits the road, the actual gameplay experience, things probably haven't changed as much as you think. Yes, production methodologies have changed. Yes, there are fads and trends like monster boxes and stuff like that. But for the most part, nope. The vast majority of the stuff that comes out that I appreciate every year, in 2020, you've got Calico, you've got Cosmic Colonies, you've got My Farm Shop, you've got Furnace. There's 4 games in my top 10 that are simple, elegant, straightforward games that are not crazy, over-the-top, ambitious. And most of the rest of them aren't too far removed from Agricola or Castles of Burgundy. So, yeah. I'm sorry, Camilla, I'm trying to think of again, most of the stuff that has changed while you were away is aesthetics and fluff that doesn't really matter. There are more now, back then, back when you were still in it, we were getting maybe, actually, let's test this. Right. Admittedly, this is a very small data point, but using my personal collection in 2017 of all the games I played in 2017, how many did I keep? 34. All right. In 2018, how many did I keep? 39. In 2019, how many did I keep? 48. In 2020, how many did I keep? 43, a little bit of a drop. In 2021, 46. In 2022, 34. Ooh, now that's a big drop. And then, of course, who knows about this year because, hey, I've only played half a dozen games so far because, we haven't hit Essen Spiel yet. Anyway, what am I saying? I am saying, overall, the biggest change is the industry has gotten much better at its job. Every year, there are, for the most part, maybe not consistently year on year, but overall, we are trending to every year, there are more great games available than the previous year. There's more variety, more options, more choice, which I appreciate is also more of a headache. What can I say? I do my best. You can go to top.rahdo.com and let me go back to it for a second. Every one of these games where I've got a video, you can just click on the video and see why it's why Shapers of Gaia is my number 8 game of last year. So I'm doing my best to try to make it a little bit easier for you. But again, that's if you're calibrated and coordinated to what I dig. And, not everybody's going to be. So you've got to find somebody that matches your taste. There are other options. Camilla, what was a game that you loved? Did you mention anything in here from back in the day that you loved? A specific game? No, you didn't, but I am just going to guess, Camilla, that if you used to listen to my podcast, I'm going to guess at some point you tried out Agricola and thought it was the bee's knees, right? Let's see, hold on, let's come back over here. By the way, also, when you're at top.rahdo.com, you can go directly to my videos, or you can go directly to the game itself. Just click on the game, it'll take you to the page on Board Game Geek. Here's something handy. Go to Board Game Geek. Here's Agricola. This is one of the coolest things Board Game Geek has introduced. A few years ago, they did this. Scroll down a little bit, and it'll say, fans also like. And it will tell you some other games you can check out. Hey, there's 28 other games that they recommend if you like Agricola, like Viticulture and Concordia and Troyes and Galaxy Trucker. Now, this is really interesting. I was expecting it was going to tell me about some new games, but it's only telling me about older games. Now, I'm trying to think of the first thing I can think of, Fantastic Factory. Fantastic Factories. Fantastic Factories is a game that I absolutely adore. I gave it an 8.5 in 2019. It's probably in my top 20 of the year. But anyway, if I look at that as a more recent game, if you can find one recent game you liked, and then you come here, it'll tell you about other recent games. It seems like this system is kind of sticking within eras as well. But hey, Planet Unknown and Calico, those are fantastic suggestions if you like Fantastic Factories. And Furnace and Meadow. If you can find one game you like, Camilla, Board Game Geek has your back. It will give you very, very good suggestions based on the just kind of hive mind of Board Game Geek. So that's something you could use to try to get back into the swing of things. Just find a few you like from more recently and then see what Board Game Geek recommends. So that might be a place that you might want to start. Phew. Okay. And then let's move on to Daniel. Daniel has a few questions. For starters, a luck in cooperative games number 3. Okay, this is something Daniel and I have been going back and forth on. I'm sorry, Daniel, as you know, I don't remember what I said a month ago, but hopefully you'll help me see. All right, so co-op luck, part 3, the next generation. So Daniel mentions, Aeon's End, I agree that 4 boss turns in a row isn't a big deal. Neither is deck reshuffling, but it is frustrating and unfun. Okay, it's coming back to me, Daniel. Luck for the sake of luck. Well, you know what? Not every game is for everybody, Daniel. I don't look at it that way. Well, first of all, a game with no luck to me is pretty boring. I want to be able to make reasoned expectations, and sometimes those expectations come to pass, and I get a wonderful sense of satisfaction that, I was ahead of the curve. I made the right call. I am brilliant. And sometimes I want those expectations to be subverted. And in a competitive game, they can be subverted by the unpredictability of the human brain. In a co-op game, they can be subverted by sometimes probabilities. Sometimes you roll three ones on a roll, even though that's statistically unlikely. Sometimes it happens, and luck goes the other way. And I don't think of that as just luck for the sake of luck. I think of that as an important ingredient in the overall stew of good, exciting cooperative gameplay. I want sometimes for me to feel like, I beat this system. Sometimes I want this system to beat me. And if there was no luck, if I could just figure out everything ahead of time, then why aren't I just doing a crossword puzzle or Sudoku instead? You need that juice, that extra zip of life. And honestly, if you find that frustrating, I'm sorry, just isn't for you. But it is still an important part of the game. And it is still a system that you should not be engaging on hey, that's not fair. How could I know the boss was going to attack 2 times in a row? Instead, you need to approach this. Now, always remember, it's unlikely, but the boss might attack 2 times in a row. And if that happens, am I prepared for it? It's just giving you an extra hurdle that you have to overcome, an extra complication that you have to manage. And to me, anyway, that's where the fun comes in. But anyway, Daniel continues, less said about the cards that say a mage such and such takes damage equal to their current life, the better. That's the thing. You know those are in there. You know that every once in a while the game can throw a nuke on you, and you have to be prepared for that. Now, honestly, I don't think such cards actually exist, but if they do, I do think it's important that you have an opportunity, like an event that would just like insta-kill somebody, that should come out at the beginning of a round, so you have the entire round to deal with it. If that's something that comes out and immediately resolves, yeah, I would say that is fundamentally poor design. But this is getting back to what you said at the beginning, where you said, oh, this is so common to see these, and I still maintain that, where, just draw a card and just insta-die is very few and far between. You don't see that in games. Instead, you see games where, this card that just got revealed and I don't have time to respond to does kill me, but not because no matter what, under any circumstances, it was going to insta-kill me. It insta-killed me because I put myself in a precarious situation where I was not going to be able to survive. That's the trick. That's how you have to approach these. When you say you died to no fault of your own, technically full health, and if you're one of the mages with one breach, that might be technically mean you're out of the game. Again, you'd have to give me, you state like that, this is as common as, what's a really common thing? As common as carbon, but I don't think it is. I think what you're describing there, a card that says one player instantly dies no matter what, there's nothing they can do, even if, I don't believe that exists. I would agree with you that is a bad card and shouldn't exist in a game. And yeah, maybe a few of them squeeze in, but that is not the norm. The norm is a thing comes out that kills you because of the situation you allowed yourself to get into. All right. And that card comes randomly into the boss deck, so it can be there or not. And even if you knew it was in the deck, there's nothing to prevent it. Well, again, that particular card, I agree. But we're gonna have to do co-op luck in games number 4, and you're gonna have to tell me these specific cards, and I will go get them out of the box, and we will evaluate that together. Because I'm gonna have to say right now, Daniel, you're making a straw man. I believe you are remembering a circumstance where you feel like, that card, there was nothing I could have done. There is no way in any universe I could have ever prepared for it. And I'm gonna say, yeah, that card killed you because 3 turns ago, you didn't buy a health pack, or whatever it might be. Anyway, though, let's continue. That being said, here's the question. The question. Do I think that these 2 or 3 chaotic cards and otherwise fair games are making the game better? If yes, why? Well, first of all, you have not given specific examples, so we'll have to follow up this next month. I'm sure you'll be back. You know the email, questions at rahdo.com, everybody. But, if we're I will grant that let's say these cards exist in Aeon's End, literally a nuclear bomb that there is nothing that can be done to instantly, permanently remove a player from the game on the very, very first turn. Right? Let's say that there in a given game there are 2 or 3 of those. Does the existence of that improve the quality of the game? Not as explained by that. A card that can insta-kill and remove from the entire experience a player from in round 1 before they've even had a chance to draw their first card or roll their first die, that is fundamentally poor design. I would agree with that. What I would not agree with is that actually exists. So you will have to follow back on that. Okay, question number 2 from Daniel. In my opinion, what are the elements, mechanisms, appeal, etc., that a fictional best board game of all time should have? For example, the best game of all time should be a war game / dungeon crawler / adventure game, etc., with resource / hand management / deck building, and have 4+ difficulty, complexity modes, etc. So, well, first of all, you didn't give me enough to answer this question, so I'm going to have to fill in the blanks here. Because there's 2 ways I could answer this. And the way I'm inclined to answer this and the way that I answer everything is, well, I can tell you that answer a best game of a best board game of all time for me. But a best board game of all time for me, I guarantee you, is going to be a piece of hot garbage for a sizable percentage of the board game geek community, because we're all unique snowflakes and we all like what we like and dislike what we dislike. And so, on some level, it's meaningless. Now, what I suspect you're asking is a true, objective across the board for all human beings throughout all of history, greatest game of all time, what would that have? I don't think it exists. I don't think it fundamentally exists. But, if I were to try to do it as a thought exercise, because here's the deal, answering it for me is very easy. Just go to games.rahdo.com. You'll see my number one ranked game of all time. You can see my top 10 ranked games of all time. Break those down, find the most common elements, stitching all those things together, and you'll see the answer for me personally, what makes a greatest game of all time, right? But if we were to say, for humanity as a whole, what are the objective traits to create the greatest game of all time? I think, first of all, it has to work well. In years past, I would have said it has to work well from 2 to 5 players, but I'm going to extend that to say it can't be considered the greatest game of all time unless it works well from 1 to 5 players at least. I'm not going to say for all player counts. I don't think that's reasonable, but if a game wants to be considered greatest game of all time, truly for humanity, I'm going to say it has to be able to support equally well a 1-player game all the way up to a 5-player game. Could go higher, but I'm going to say, all right. So that's one thing that I think is hugely important. I'm going to have to say it's got to be pretty AF. It's got to be just lovely and gorgeous. And I'm going to go so far as to say not in a quirky way, but in kind of a universally appreciation of beauty kind of way. Because again, I'm trying to cast nets of just things you got to do. If you want to say this is truly greatest of all time, I'm trying to cast a blanket net as much as possible. It doesn't have to be the prettiest game of all time, but it has to hit certain aesthetic standards. And when I'm talking about universal standards, I'm talking about like rules of 3, is it the Fibonacci circle? Symmetry between images. Like the real hard science of beauty. Because our brains, what we think of as beauty in the human face, more than anything else, is just how symmetrical the left and right side of their face is. And the more asymmetrical, the more we respond saying, oh, that person is less attractive. Because our brains are hardwired to use our faces as some kind of representation of the genetic predisposition of that person if we're evaluating them as a mate or a competitor. The stronger their genetics, the more attractive we find them. And, our stupid monkey brains on some level think, yeah, asymmetry is a way to get that because we're evolved from apes and we don't know any better. Of course, that's not a true reflection of people, and their true worth, but it is still something that works in our brain. So I would say a game has to leverage that. So it has to work for player counts. It has to, hit a certain level of aesthetic pleasingness. I would say, and I don't think you're going to like this, Daniel, it has to have a strong ratio. I was gonna throw luck in. I know luck is a dirty word for you, and I was almost gonna throw that in there. That's the thing. No. It has to. Okay, I'm gonna take back for that because what do I appreciate about luck in games? I appreciate in a co-op game. What I really appreciate is what it does. I think it has to be a game that has probably, I think, an overall ratio. Let's say 4/5 of the overall experience. Maybe 2/3 of the overall experience, I have to feel like I am in control. The game has to give me a sense that I can make smart tactical and strategic decisions that allows me to control my destiny. And then the remainder, I have to be in a situation where I can potentially be confounded by whatever it is that goes into the game. I think, and that ratio, maybe it's 4/5. Of course, it's going to be variable. So I'm just trying to find a good average, maybe 75-25, maybe 75% I'm in control, 25%, maybe even 80-20. Because, of course, I lean more towards having more control with just like occasional flashes of confoundedness. Now, those aren't the kind of things you're talking about. You're talking about, sci and fiction and fantasy. And I'm not going to say any of those things can truly be applied towards this. I'm looking down more at the fundamental core building blocks of the experience this game creates. Is it visually and tactilely, pleasing? Does it give me a sense of control over my destiny? Here's another one. Does it have enough depth to allow me to revisit it over and over and find new avenues within it, right? I think that's absolutely essential. There's probably other things, but I can't spend forever on every single question, so those are some off the top of my head. Okay, in terms of how complex, I'm going to stop right there. That was fun. Okay, Daniel's final question. I'd argue that Gloomhaven was not number one on Board Game Geek because of enormity, although it did help. It is number one because it's a dungeon crawler for Eurogamers and Ameritrash gamers don't mind it, either because of the theme and unlocking of stuff. Proof, Jaws is smaller and still in the top 10 on Board Game Geek. Oh, Jaws of the Lion. I thought you meant Jaws the board game. Like, what? Jaws the board game is in the top? No, it's not. I'm going to counter that proof. I am going to go to the Board Game Geek top 10 right now. Board Game Geek, you go to Board Game Geek, you click on the BGG in the corner, and, where is it? Somewhere in here. You say browse, you say all board games, oops, and then it takes you to the Board Game Geek top 100. Now, putting aside the fact that, of course, probably since the time you've written this, Gloomhaven has dropped to number 3, but I think it's still applicable. It's still high enough to warrant stuff. Now, how many of the top 10 games are what you said? Fantasy dungeon crawlers for Eurogamers that Ameritrash gamers don't mind. Brass Birmingham, that is not that. Pandemic Legacy Season 1, not that. Ark Nova, no. Twilight Imperium 4, no, not Dungeon Crawler. Terraforming Mars? No. Dune Imperium? No. War of the Ring? No. Star Wars Rebellion? No. Spirit Island? No. That's the top 10. And I am going to ignore Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion. Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion is here because it's Gloomhaven. Oh, you're saying Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion... I'll tell you, Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion is on here is because it's an expansion to Gloomhaven. If Gloomhaven had not previously made it to the number one, Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion was ultimately going to get a ranking close to wherever Gloomhaven was. If Gloomhaven had tapped out in the top 800, Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion would be in the top 900. That's just where it was going to be. So Gloomhaven making it in this list as a smaller, less robust game is immaterial. Gloomhaven is there because it's a sequel to the number one game. So that's why I'm going to take it out. And the other 9, but let's keep going. If you say that Gloomhaven only succeeded, there are other games that do well. I mean, let's see. How far do we have to go before we get to another Gloomhaven game in the top 100? Let's see. Nemesis, I would say, is probably the closest thing to that. Although Nemesis is not a very Euro-y game at all, is it? It's really not. And you said it's a Euro game through and through. So let's look for a Euro dungeon crawler. Clank Legacy. That's a Euro dungeon crawler. So we've got to go up to number 24, or maybe around number 20 if you take out duplicates. So we've got one in the top 10. We've got one in the top 20. That's not bad. Let's keep going. Let's find the next one. I'm curious to see how common this will be. Lost Ruins. No, I'm not going to call Lost Ruins Arnak. All right. Ooh, Mage Knight the board game. There's number 3. So we've got one in the 30s now. It seems like, we skipped the teens entirely, but we're getting one every 10 or 20, which means there is definitely love for Euro-y style fantasy adventure. I think I would agree there is an appetite for that. But these other games have not taken the number 2, 3, and 4 slot. I mean, what I was really looking for was Oathsworn. Oh, Too Many Bones. There's another one. So there is certainly a love for this. But if I were to break down the top 100 and how many Gloomhaven-esque games there are versus... that would actually be a really interesting thought exercise. Dan, if you got some time, do it, and we'll talk about it next month. Of the Board Game Geek Top 100, how many are straight Euro economic simulations? How many are, fantasy adventure games? How many are whatever you want to break it down? And that would be a really interesting way to get the gestalt of the Board Game Geek hive mind. But anyway, I think we've got that covered. So let's move on. Darren says... Watching The Rankening this week, and for those who don't know, The Rankening is a bi-weekly show I do where I compare all my games. I compare Overboss to Rise. I compare Hallertau to Roll Camera, and it's like a series of mini death matches as I'm slowly ranking my entire collection. And it gives me an opportunity to talk about games, often games that you may never have heard of, quite frankly. Anyway, that's what The Rankening is. A lot of fun. People seem to enjoy it. So anyway, Darren was watching the ranking, and I mentioned game designers redesigning older games and making them a bit easier going. Well, okay, I didn't need to describe the ranking at all. We're moving completely changing subjects. This would be because back in the day, all right, so yes, I've talked about this on more than one occasion. I'm more often seeing this trend that when a game gets revisited, gets a Deluxe Lavish 2.0, it seems to me to be the case that by and large, the designs are being, in addition to the art and the production quality, being upgraded, that the designs are going through an upgrade as well. And there is a common trait amongst these upgrades that has a tendency towards, one, increasing the complexity by introducing new things, like beer in Brass Birmingham, while at the same time, two, decreasing the challenge the players have to face. Beer makes your life easier. Brass Birmingham, again, lets you create wild cards to do your actions if the cards don't give you what you want. So, hey, the rules get more complex, but the gameplay itself is less punishing. And I'm just seeing that over and over and over again. Tell me if I'm wrong, folks. It just seems, when I start noticing Stefan Feld doing it, I'm like, wow, this is definitely a thing. So anyway, Darren continues. Or Darren hypothesizes, I'm guessing. This would be because back in the day, board games were only played by gamers. No one else knew they existed, but now they're played by everyone. So a game needs to appeal to masses and not just the niche audience who wants a gamer game. Okay, so I guess in the ranking, I must have asked, hey, why do you think this is? And Darren is answering my question in the podcast. There's crossover! Yay! I disagree, Darren, because we're talking about Brass. We're talking about Macau. We are talking about Agricola. We are not talking about games that are, how did you put it? Played by everyone. I'm not talking about that. I suspect that, because I'm talking about games that were already super crunchy and complicated, and they're becoming more complicated. Caverna from Agricola added so much extra stuff, made this game so much more complex, harder to learn, and yet at the same time gave you wildcard resources and doesn't punish you as much for not feeding and all this kind of stuff. So it makes it less punishing and more complicated. That to me is in no way, shape, or form a recipe for making a game more appealing to a mass market. Games have to become less complicated to appeal to a mass market more. And by and large, in the games I've noticed this happening, that's not what's happening. So I don't think that's it, Darren. I think it's a reflection of, these are gamer geek games. These are not, I'm not talking about, is this happening with gateway games? I don't think so. What's the best thing I can think of? There's Ticket to Ride. And then there's these Ticket to Ride Express games to make them even more gateway, and they make the game simpler, not more complicated. So I don't think this is happening with gateway games. It's happening with heavy, rich, crunchy, meaty games. And it's because obviously the publishers are doing it because they have identified this is an important thing to do to ensure we sell better. I think more often than not, really what's happening is the publishers are responding to outspoken players who said, this game is too mean, it's too harsh, it's too unfair and crushing to my spirit. And like, okay, well, I'll tell you what, we'll pull it back. We'll make it a little bit easier for you. But then they find, the game isn't as much fun. Because that tension, that threat, that challenge to overcome and the satisfaction you get for successfully feeding your family in Agricola, when it's gone, the game falls flat. So then what do they have to do? Well, okay, let's throw some more bells and whistles. Let's throw some more toys in the box. And they up the complexity to compensate for the drop in tension. That's what I think is happening. But I don't know. I've never actually talked to any developer about that. Okay. Gerard says, question number 1. When you play games, a game not for the Rahdo Runs Through channel, that game has events. Do you house rule it to work like your favorite event system, like Orleans, in that you can see the next upcoming event? No. Okay, so first of all, what Gerald means is, whenever on those rare occasions when Jen and I play a game just for fun, right? A game that's not because, I want to cover it in the next couple of weeks on the channel. So Jen and I have to play this. I have to learn the game. I have to learn its ins and outs and all that. It's my job. When I play a game for fun, which I think predominantly would happen at conventions more than anything else, quite frankly, it doesn't happen much in our lives, but let's say it did happen. Gerald is right to point out that I have often decried, or no, more to the point, I have often put on a pedestal game designs that introduce surprise twists through an event, a card of events that can change the economy of the game on a whim, or create new obstacles to overcome, or eliminate obstacles, or whatever it might be. I always appreciate it when games don't just draw the card and it immediately resolves and players did not have a time to respond to it, and inevitably some players benefit from it more than others, and I think that's actually weak design. Or at best, I'm going to say average design, right? Because it's done a lot. It's still done a lot to this day. It's much better to say, hey, reveal the card and give everybody 2 full turns before, so they can respond to it, because it's not going to hit you for 2 turns. That's the much better design. And so it's also a design that is very easy to retrofit. So is that something that I would be implicitly inclined to do? Would I house rule games to do that, given the opportunity? The answer is no. Because I work under the assumption, with very few exceptions, I'd probably maybe do it every once in a while. But for the most part, if I have the rare window to play a game just for fun, I don't want to experiment. That game, before it hit my table, was played in thousands. I was about to say hundreds of thousands, probably not, but thousands of man hours of play testing and feedback and design iteration and all this stuff. And so, on the one hand, I've got this mountain of evidence that says this is the best this game can be. And on the other hand, I've got my own personal little predilection. And yes, my own personal predilection might make it better for me personally, but what I worry about is there is a reason, because of this mountain of evidence to the contrary, that the game is the way it is. And what I don't want to do is spend the entire game thinking, wow, me doing this, am I actually breaking the game? Am I hurting the game? Am I making the game too easy? Am I breaking the balance of it because I get a chance to respond to events? And the game was never designed with that in mind. I don't want that extra level. There's actually an entry about this on faq.rahdo.com. Long story short, I generally avoid unofficial house rules because they have not been vetted by the development team, who truly understand in a way that I never will what the underlying intent of this game experience is. And if I want to experience the way the artist intended. So no, I would tend not to do that. I would also tend to play a game that's better designed and actually implements that from the get-go. Question 2. When I worked in video games, how long did it take to finish developing a video game that took the longest? What game is the quickest? You know what? That needs to go into the personal Q&A because that has nothing to do with board games. So we're going to move that into the section later on. Question number 3. Have I thrown off the Rosenberg shackles? Do I no longer prefer games like this? I don't think so. I think I still love it. I love the Rosenberg shackles being earlier Uwe Rosenberg games tended to treat you very roughly, give you a lot of tough problems to overcome, and if you failed to overcome them, it would punish you, penalize you. I still like that. I will say, though, it's maybe you're responding to the fact that I think my wife is developing less of a tolerance for that. That she is, because of where her headspace is in our lives right now, mostly because we're no longer living in Malta anymore. We moved back to the States, and that has created so much more stress in our lives, especially hers. And we do everything we can to try and minimize it. But I think she's in a point where she has less enthusiasm. And when she plays a game, she's looking for more something to just relax and not have huge challenges to overcome. So, does that have a knock-on effect for what we actually play? Yeah, probably. Doesn't change my opinions. I want a game to just beat me up and make me try to overcome insurmountable odds. That's what I love the most. Or maybe not the most, but that's what I really appreciate. And that will be the end of this session of the Rahdo Q&A. Thank you, folks, for watching and also for submitting your questions. Send me more to the email address questions@rahdo.com, and I'll get you covered in a future episode. And in the meantime, if you would like to hear some more, you're in luck. I have been doing the Rahdo Talks Through audio podcast for years now with my wife, Jen, and we have got hundreds of hours for you to enjoy. You can hit that big box that's on screen right now if you want to dive deep. Also, you can go on ahead and subscribe so you won't miss the next Rahdo Q&A. And thank you, folks, for watching, for listening. Have a very, very nice day. Talk to you later. So long. Bye-bye.